So if we drop expectations, we won't have to suffer their ultimate inevitable failure. And some of you may say, Sage, how can I function without expectations? Isn't this impractical and not in accordance with how things work in the mundane reality? How can I do anything or achieve any goal without some kind of utilization of expectations? Well, first off, this might not be realistically employable to many of the participants in the rat race. If what you seek is inner peace, and to discover the truth of your non-being, and to live a new life that is in accord with the truth of this new description of reality, you might have to give up on the rat race. Walk away from that whole way of life. When you finally reach the point where you are ready to discard the falsity of that old description of reality. And I say this because it is much more difficult to stay in the rat race and not have expectations that are tied up in outcome. Indeed, the expectation of outcome serves as some of the ground rules in the rat race. As even being a rat in the race is built on the premise that we must strive, compete, perform, grab, and hoard to be considered a successful winner. And this is completely at odds with the blueprint of the empty self. Not to say that it is completely impossible, but doing so would require a new navigational default. There are some manifestations of the empty self that succeed at many goals, acquire much wealth and property, and have racked up many achievements in the halls of human record-keeping. And they are doing so without expectation, and do not tie the inner peace of the empty self into being conditional to specific outcome. This means following a path of commitment to positive self-reliance, unconditional to circumstance. This means that the path itself is enough, and any outcome of efforts along the path do not become deciding factors to the inner peace of the one who walks it. So we may delegate tasks to others, but we do not become emotionally wounded when they do not work out. Instead, we pay attention to what exactly happened and make adjustments accordingly. We may set goals, but do not become devastated by failure or setbacks. If we can act without being motivated by a desired outcome, and instead just focus our intent and willpower on the endeavor at hand, more times than not, we will not be disappointed. Pure action without investment is much more potent than action motivated by investment. In much the same way as creativity being more pure and engaging when it is inspired by pure spontaneity of imagination, rather than the motivation of greed and profit. Pure action of a clear mind performs with much more clarity and impeccability than the fickle, clouded navigation of the one who is preoccupied with an investment. In other words, if you can be at peace, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, with success or failure, or with approval or rejection, and not be moved from this peace, regardless of how the appearances arrange themselves, you will have reached the pinnacle state of the empty self. There is no greater abundance than of the man who wants nothing. There is no greater success than of the man who has accepted himself as he is, unconditionally. There is no greater peace than of the man who has let go, surrendered everything, and has embraced the empty self as it is, without having the need to label it with anything. This may seem like a great struggle to establish, but it only seems that way because it doesn't involve adding anything, which is what we are used to. We are used to filling ourselves up with beliefs and knowledge, and after so much time of doing this, we assume that this is the only way to pursue the truth, not realizing that it only increases delusion and pushes us further and further away from the clarity of our true selves. If we were to see through this debilitating tendency, we would come to understand that the truth isn't a matter of knowledge or beliefs, and that, contrary to what we used to think, these things really only serve as anchors or shackles that weigh us down and take away our freedom. Once we can clearly understand this for ourselves and know why it is empirically, then we will know that the remedy to this is an effortless effort. That is, there's nothing to fight against. It's only a matter of releasing our tight grip. Like if we equate it to the metaphor of finding ourselves in the middle of a mighty river. The only thing we must do is relax and float downstream, letting the currents of the water do the work, as opposed to kicking, screaming, and struggling. The struggling is actually what eventually brings us down to die at the bottom of the mighty river. The currents of the waters are forever moving, forever changing, forever fluxing. To seek to try and control this process is a futile pursuit. And believing that we can control it is a perfect example of a belief or knowledge becoming a heavy burden. We must unlearn all of these restricting limitations, for all they do is serve as tools of our disempowerment. But wait, Sage, it's impossible to unlearn, right? We can't unsee or unlearn things unless our brains are deteriorating. What we learn remains in our brains. We can't unknow it or erase it. Yes, I know. I know that this is what many of you believe. And so this is the first thing that you need to unlearn. The belief that unlearning is impossible. Once you have dismantled this initial blockade, you will be ready to proceed deeper down the rabbit hole.